We're nearly at the end of our journey into research methods and methodology. You've learned quite a bit about research orientation as the overall umbrella, overall justification for choosing your research design. You've learned a bit about research design as a justification, rationale for choosing the exact configuration of data collection and analysis methods. Now, what we're going to do in this video is spend a few minutes trying to get an overview of the data collection and analysis methods most used by our students. And then you will have face-to-face sessions in this course with specialists using these research methods in their research. To show you what kind of methods can be used for each research design discussed previously, I have chosen this graphic representation. So for experimental designs, the appropriate methods of data collection include lab experiment and quasi-experiments. Now, you may remember that I said in social sciences, hence accounting and finance, it is very improbable that you will be able to use lab experiments, or that indeed you will even need to use lab experiments, because most experimental design studies in our discipline use quasi-experiments, and we will see in a few minutes what quasi-experiments are. Now, the data emerged from such experiments will be analyzed through statistical analysis. This is a generic analysis mostly used with quantitative data, such as the one emerging from an experiment or indeed a quasi-experiment. Next, let's talk about the cross-sectional design and the methods that are mostly used with such a research design. We're more likely to use analytic questionnaire survey or structured interviews. In other words, the classic questionnaires that you may be accustomed to, either self-administered by the respondent or administered by the researcher. The data emerged from these data collection methods will then be analyzed again with statistical analysis packages. Moving on to longitudinal design, such studies also employ questionnaires, but this time they go back to the same respondents in a few points in time. If you do longitudinal research, you are likely to employ such questionnaires or indeed likely to use databases of data obtained through such methods. Again, the preferred data analysis method is statistical analysis, to which one could also add econometrics in some cases, especially in finance. Departing the realm of the quantitative data, case study designs work with either descriptive questionnaire surveys or semi-structured interviews. Or if we are to speak about secondary data, documentary analysis will fall under the same research design umbrella. The data emerged from such sources will be analyzed through grounded theory or discourse analysis. Grounded theory is a method in its own right, and you will have probably encountered articles or studies using such method of analysis already. You may have encountered discourse analysis or one of its derivatives, other labels that are associated with discourse analysis, but that may bear different labels, for example, content analysis or textual analysis. Now, let's look at these methods a bit more closely. Let's go through their main features, key strengths, and weaknesses. Laboratory experiments consist of manipulation of an independent variable under controlled conditions in a simulated environment and measurement of its effect on a dependent variable. The key strength is that it can establish conclusively cause and effect relationships between the two types of variables. And indeed, many of us believe this should be the ultimate aim of any research, to shed understanding over causes for any particular effect we may be able to observe. However, most research is indeed not done through lab experiments because real-world behavior is difficult to be observed through a simulated environment and controlled conditions. Quasi-experiment, measurement of the dependent variable in a real setting. And so the difference here is that the setting is real, is not simulated, is not controlled. And we're looking at the independent variable as it occurs naturally, rather than manipulated synthetically. The key strength of the method is that it can provide strong but not conclusive evidence suggesting cause and effect relationships between the variables. The major weakness is that the findings are not conclusive because of the quasi component of the experiment. Moving on to analytic surveys, main features of this method include the collection of large samples of perceptions, beliefs, attitudes, or behavior at a specific time and place. Now, it could be one point in time, in which case you would employ this under cross-sectional design, or you could go back a few times in a row and obtain a longitudinal research design. The key strength consists of the ease of administration, of coding, scoring, and the existence of numerous very reliable statistical analysis packages. Weaknesses include the fact that they provide distorted results sometimes due to things like sampling error, poorly designed instruments, or poorly designed questions, and response biases. Now, any of these may happen without the researcher's knowledge, rendering the findings invalid. And a proper in-depth discussion on this method will tell you a bit more about how to avoid those issues. About qualitative research methods, semi-structured interviews or descriptive surveys are included under this category. The main features of such methods include that the investigation is intensive and in-depth, so sample size, for example, is of no relevance here. It may occur in one or a few research settings, never in a statistically significant number of settings. The strength is that it can provide detailed descriptive data, and it can allow for the analysis of new, complex, rare, or just generally not fully understood phenomena. Its major weakness is that it can be emotionally and resource consuming because it relies on intense interaction with the subjects. Also, the results are highly reliant on the researcher's interpretation and can be challenged on grounds of reliability. And again, you will find more about such evaluative structures when you study this method in depth in your face-to-face setting. Finally, the findings may not be representative of the phenomena in all possible research settings, although they are representative of the settings directly employed in the research. Finally, databases and just generally use of secondary data, which could be qualitative or quantitative. Quantitative if you deal with, for example, a large panel survey such as Understanding Society, or qualitative data if, for example, you rely on newspaper content or on video footage such as movies, why not, or interviews appearing in popular media. Now, the main features included on our table refer directly to databases of quantitative data. The key strength of using secondary data is that you have access to good quality data with little cost and in short time. If we are talking about panel surveys, so longitudinal data, the advantage of using secondary data here is obvious. Longitudinal data is collected through massive time and resource investment, very rarely or never at hand for any researcher. So you are strongly encouraged to make use of such sources. And if you do come across a longitudinal database, you will be able to also generalize from your findings, which is very, very useful. The major weakness of using secondary data is that the proxies you may be using for your research in relation to that data may be questionable, may not be ideal because it wasn't you collecting that data in the first place. So such data is collected for generic purposes or for specific purposes, but possibly quite different from yours in your research. Also, although in large databases that doesn't really apply, but it does apply in, say, content of newspapers or other sources. Another weakness, therefore, is the fact that you'll have no control over the overall quality of that data. But the obvious benefit of time and resource economy cannot be overstated.